Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another teacher talk session tonight. And tonight we are going to have our the third session. And before inviting my guest, I would like to express my condolences for all our people who lost their lives, all people who lost their families, neighbors, and friends in the devastating earthquakes that happened on the 6th of February. I'm deeply saddened, and this feeling is something I will remember for a lifetime. I'm proud of my nation who united for our fellow citizens in the disaster area. And also, I'm grateful to all the people who joined how can I say, who joined hands with us from all over the world. I'm also thankful to all those rescue teams too. I wish we had been more proactive and could have, avoided this massive number of loss. But I'm sure that we will recover together. And now let me invite my guest and Halid Hicazi, and he is a TOEFL, IELTS, and General English Tutor. Let me invite him.
Yes, testing.
Yes. Hello, sir.
Hello, can you hear me well? Is my connection good enough? I can hear you, sir. I can hear you very well, sir. Can you hear me? Okay. Let's do the necessary adjustments.
Oh.
Is my voice reaching you right on time? Okay, sir. Take your time.
No?
Yeah, yes, sir. Everything was going great. Everything was going fine. When you started, I was watching you. And just by the
Oh.
time I accepted the invitation, that's
Oh.
when something happened to your device. But right now, everything is fine. Okay.
Oh. Okay. Wonderful. So, welcome to our 103rd session, sir.
Thank you
It's
very much.
a great.
Thanks for having
It's
me. Thanks for having me.
it's a great pleasure to have you.
The pleasure is mine.
And but as we know that we are all deeply sad, the
Of course.
situations that happened. Before inviting you, I explained my feelings to our guests.
I was watching,
So
sir. I was right
maybe
here. I was
maybe
watching.
maybe you would like to say something about it. Would you like to say anything about it?
Absolutely. It goes without
Sure.
saying. It's a mutual feeling.
Mhm.
And let me just start by saying that I am Turkish by choice. You know, there's something called American by choice.
Uh-huh.
And I was supposed to be American by choice in my childhood, and I'm going to be American by choice, and this is something different. But as for Turkey, it is considered not only my second country, it is considered to be my country. And this is no laughing matter. This is no compliment. But in hard times, in times of need, I've always been ready to support all my friends and students in this country, and I will continue to support them. That's for sure. I also believe in motivation, not just in expressing sadness and sorrow
Mhm.
and expressing, deep sadness for them. It is good. I don't even say for them, I say for us. So, yes, but we are going to be strong. We're going to get out of this
Sure.
stronger. I saw
Sure.
one teacher from Hatay who lives in London, and she said, we're going to come out of this even stronger, hopefully. By the way, I don't mean to say something marginal. It is about the topic. I do have a friend from Azerbaijan who just texted me a message 5 minutes ago. saying that there was another earthquake and her son felt it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
so I mean, uh, we're going through this, and it's not, these times are exceptional. It's not an ordinary thing to keep having earthquakes back to back. Yes, sir.
I see.
And
Yes. Yeah.
we have postponed our meeting, our live streaming
Yeah.
event for a couple of weeks. And honestly,
Yes, we
you
did.
know, I don't want to postpone it anymore because a couple of weeks is still not enough. But after all, let's just give it a try. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, sure. Sure. I just also we can do that. But I heard also the same. There was an earthquake again in Hatay and also the other cities and felt it too.
Let's just
And
keep
I
our
hope nothing
fingers,
happened.
let's keep our fingers
Sure
crossed,
for
and let's
them.
pray for them. Yes, let's keep praying for
Okay.
them.
Okay, sir. Let's start. Let's start. And can you tell us about yourself, please, and a bit about your experiences too?
Well, thanks for asking me this question, because whenever I ask people this question, they say, what would you like to know? So how about, thank you for being specific. So, because they say, what would you like to know? And I say, look, I'm not the FBI. I'm not going to ask you about where you were last night. So you mean you want me to introduce myself as a tutor and a teacher? Sure. So it all starts with the name, right? You have to say the name and the last name. There's something special in Turkey, and we have original Turkish roots too, like I mentioned. So, for example, we have names like, for example, this and that. For example, you have in your country, like you say, Hassan Hussein together. And so when I say that my name is Halid Hicazi, some people think that that's just my name. So they wait for the last name. That's what I heard last year. I was teaching in one of the colleges, and they said, so what is the last name? And I said, well, the last name is Hicazi, and my first name is Halid.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born in the 1980s, which makes me pretty old by now and middle-aged. And, well, I introduce myself as someone who has been teaching for almost 20 years by now. So they say, but how is that even possible? Yes, so my name is Halid Hicazi, and I was born in the 1980s, and I am married. I have 2 children now. I have been in this country, Turkey, for almost 8 years. Before that, I was in Damascus, which is the capital of Syria. People in Turkish say Sham. The locals in Damascus also say Sham. My village is not exactly Damascus. It's a village between Lebanon and Damascus. That's
I
my
see.
hometown. My grandfather also had a Turkish mother, and he was born there. And my grandfather himself married a Turkish woman too. So that makes us, like, my own grandmother was Turk, and my father's grandmother was also Turk. Besides, that village is kind of a very small touristic village,
I
and a
see.
lot of tourists came there all the time before the sad events broke out. So this is
Mm-hmm.
how it all started with me. In my childhood, I wanted to be a tourist guide or a flight attendant. It was something about English. It was something about traveling.
I
And
see.
this is how it all
I see.
began.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Let's move to another question. What was or were your turning point or points in your own education?
A turning point in my education.
Yes.
Well, I can say that a turning point in my education started when I began teaching during high school. And I got a scholarship, a free access to the American Language Center there. So I had a cousin who had a crush on me. This is embarrassing, but she wanted me to teach her. She wanted to find an excuse for, spending more time with me. And so she told her dad, listen, my cousin is really better than my teacher, so can I just have lessons with him? He said, but your cousin is young. How can he teach you? I was only like 15 years old and she was like 14. And it began in a casual way. So I just helped her with her quizzes and with her tests. But a turning point was when I started teaching her. I always tell my students, the
Uh-huh.
best way to learn is to teach. So believe it or not, I won a scholarship and I started attending workshops. So the story continued with my cousin telling her classmates that my cousin is better than the teacher at school and he can really teach. He's young, but he can do it. So my father heard about it and he told his boss at work, his manager at work, my son is only 15 and he started teaching. Because my cousin's friends, just made a group for me and they said, how about some private tutorials and private sessions? Can we start learning together? And at the beginning, it was unpaid, it was free of charge. And then there was this kind of spring break when I had some activity and a quick, we call it crash course, and it worked. So when my father told his boss at work, his boss said, really? Why not? I have a son who's taken. It's just like when you have in Turkey this exam called LGS, that age. So he said, can he teach my son? And, my father's boss was like a VIP, so he sent his car with a driver to pick me up every weekend. So my father was impressed, was like, wow, you really got yourself a job. So a turning point in my education was when I had to teach without preparing their curriculum because I was busy with my own homework too. And when I had foreign teachers, that's when I saw a different perspective that there is nothing called teaching. It's actually facilitating the learning process and learning how to learn. Besides, the experience you gained by meeting foreign teachers and listening to their perspectives and their opinions was such a turning point. I learned more about experimental education.
I see. Oh, great. Thank you, sir. Thank you very
I
much.
hope I have answered your question. I don't know.
No, excellent. Excellent. Wonderful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I know that you have been teaching for a long time, sir, and probably you have and used or applied different teaching strategies or teaching methods in your classes. Probably you have a kind of a philosophy of teaching. So what is it? What is your philosophy of teaching?
Philosophy of teaching. I like the sound to that. Sounds like music to my ears because I talk about this almost on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
My philosophy of teaching is, let's just try to learn by deconstructing the whole process, not taking things for granted. Deconstruction and reconstruction, critical thinking. So when I try to teach someone who really loves to learn, I put myself in their shoes, first of all, and I try my best to see how things work from their perspective. And I put myself in your place as a student. So I say, if I were a student, would I be able to function, not just understand, not just learn the lesson in a didactic, theoretical way, which is a boring way. By the way, I used to really get bored during classes when I was a student. And so I promised myself that if I ever get into teaching, I am not going to be a boring teacher. So my philosophy of teaching is put yourself in the place of the students and see how things work from their perspective. And we need to, calm down to their level and try to, rebuild the process from the beginning, from their own perspective.
I got it. Thank you. Thank you, sir. And let me ask you another question about it. You look really motivated. I'm sure that every day also you start the new day. And how do you keep yourself motivated each day?
I keep myself motivated by realizing that the best way for motivation is what comes from the inside, intrinsic motivation. So there is external motivation, but this is not actually adequate. Intrinsic motivation is by, telling yourself that you're such a useful person for a lot of people. And by providing this motivation to my students and to the people around me and to coworkers and co-teachers, this is how I keep myself motivated, by knowing that I have to take the role of a leader. So leadership skills would basically, would give you a perfect combination of motivation plus leadership.
I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for your answer.
The pleasure is mine.
As far as I know that you are really experienced about TOEFL and IELTS exams. So what is TOEFL and what is IELTS exam? Can you give some information about it?
Sure. This is such a short question, deep question. And the answer to which is not rhetorical. It's not a rhetorical question. The answer to which requires hours and hours of nonstop talk. So let's just, try to, narrow it down into this. my field is TOEFL because I'm more into American English. But IELTS is an exam that I have been preparing my students for more than a decade by now.
Wow.
So what are these exams? These are just exams to test your ability to understand English. So non-native speakers are supposed to submit these two exams, one of them at least, to prove their proficiency to be able to study in a university in English-speaking countries, such as the UK, the United States, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
I see.
Well, like I said, the format of these two exams can be similar because they test four skills, mainly listening comprehension, reading skills, writing skills, and speaking skills.
I see. Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And what are these exams used for? And why do people take these exams?
These exams are used to measure students' ability and capacity and proficiency to be able to study in an English language program university in North America and in the UK mainly. These exams are such, I mean, this would be like a student who comes to your country and he wants to study a university program in the Turkish language. So you would give him basically the TOEFL exam. So TOEFL is an exam for the Turkish language proficiency. Let me explain it this way.
Sure.
If a student comes from a foreign country and he gets a scholarship, so they say, well, you have to prove that you can understand academic Turkish. And in order to prove this, the student has to provide some kind of a certificate or a score. You may send the score as an email, you may send it as a document, as a hard copy. So, the TOEFL test is a test of English as a foreign language. If I say to you that TOEFL used to be on paper, you would be surprised. TOEFL used to be on paper? Yes. Back in the day, in the past, TOEFL was paper-based test. It was called PBT, paper-based test. Now it has completely expired. Even in the past, even before 2008, before 2009, people had the choice to take the TOEFL test as computerized. So there was PBT, paper-based test. Let me start with TOEFL. And then there was the computerized test. This is before the internet, prevailed fast in the world. So when we say IBT, I get this question a lot. So do they still have paper-based test? Surprise. In this country, we still have it. I know this has expired in the world, but if you go to Ankara, the capital, and you want to join those English language, universities, they actually say this is our own proficiency test. Yeah. But fun fact, it is not. It's just the old edition, the old version of the TOEFL, which is paper-based test, and they just give it to the students. What is the difference? In the past, TOEFL did not include any speaking. So there was listening, there was writing, and there was a section called grammar and structure. This section included like sentence completion and finding the mistake. Like I said, this has expired in the whole world. Now, basically, the two tests, usually I explain this with a diagram and on Zoom, via Zoom, but now we're not going to have a diagram here, so people need to use their imaginations. These two exams are long and hard. And interestingly, as someone I'm more into American English, but I can tell you, bottom line is, let me jump to the conclusion, let me jump to the summary. IELTS is way easier than TOEFL. So, why? For one thing, you need to ask yourself as a student, are you more into speaking face-to-face, having an actual conversation with an actual person, like in real life, in person, or do you prefer to talk into a microphone? Talk into a microphone? Yes, that's the TOEFL IBT. So since IBT came into existence, it is like this. You need to record your answers in the speaking section. And by the way, TOEFL IBT is not speaking. The speaking section is not actually speaking. It's actually a presentation. You are basically seeing a question, answering that question in a presentation manner, and submitting the answer, sending the answer. You're talking into a microphone on TOEFL IBT.
I
Why?
see.
Whereas on the IELTS, the good thing is there are pros and cons here and there. There are advantages and
Sure.
disadvantages. By the way, I was just teaching someone a few minutes ago. He's an engineer, and I talked about being organized and disorganized and being spontaneous. I tend, like I said, to see, it depends right now. I mean, you are asking me this question. You are a teacher, so I find it pretty much easy to explain it. But if someone else asked me this question, if someone else asked me any question, I would first of all find out who that person is, and what they knew already, what they had known before they asked me. So
I see.
let's just imagine that someone has never heard about these two exams. Okay, we would say, do you want to study abroad? They would say, yes. Where would you like to study? Now, if they say, I want to study in the UK, in Europe, I would recommend the IELTS, believe it or not. Now, let me just imagine two circles that, cross each other. So let me just include some countries in the middle. We're talking here about Singapore, the United States, basically. Why Singapore? Well, because the American universities in Singapore, 9 out of 10 universities in the United States and Singapore prefer the TOEFL over the IELTS. Now, let's go to this side of the circle. You're talking about the whole world. And on this left side of the circle, you're talking about the United States. The whole world, including Europe, the EU, European Union, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, they prefer IELTS. But does it mean that if you take the IELTS, you cannot study in the United States? No. There are universities and institutions in the United States that also accept the IELTS.
I see.
TOEFL is out of 120 points. It includes 4 sections, which means there are 30 points for each section. 30 points for listening comprehension, 30 points for reading, and 30 points for writing, and 30 points for speaking. IELTS is measured out of 9 bands. Now, when we say 9 bands, that means, if you speak fluently like a native, perfectly, and you use a broad range of structure, and not only you sound like a native, you use variety of synonyms and contexts effectively. That's when you can score up to 8 out of 9 or 7.5. Now, this is not a complicated issue, but the exams are definitely hard, and they keep getting harder. One advantage of TOEFL IBT, since it's IBT, internet-based tests, let's talk about the pandemic. During the pandemic of the COVID-19, I hope they're not going to tag this right now when we pause this live streaming. I mean, don't get me wrong. Whenever I talk about the coronavirus, Instagram automatically says, okay, if you have any COVID problems, you can visit the World Health Organization centers.
No.
I don't want to visit them. I don't want to tag them on my own Instagram. Please stop it. So they make me even stop saying the word. It's like a nickname, COVID-19. Please. Okay, so anyway, if somebody thinks about it this way, the good side of TOEFL IBT was, guess what? During the pandemic, you could still take the test because there was something called TOEFL IBT exam centers. By the way, they need good preparation, like they need good headset, they need microphone, they need good internet connection, right? So this is a big risk. What if the exam center does not have a good connection? What if they don't have good equipment? Oh no, right?
That's the problem.
Yes, so I'm going to slow down and ask you to keep asking me all sorts of questions. We're going to allow people, we're going to engage them. How about they ask us questions? Because, by the way, I don't want to keep talking nonstop because it feels awkward. Even though I teach TOEFL IBT, which is basically about a presentation that you send into a microphone and submit into a microphone. IELTS is easier for one thing, you're talking to a real person. But one advantage of TOEFL, not only that during the pandemic you could apply that exam online and from home. Not only that, there's another advantage, which is, what could it be? Well, you take the exam in one day, one session. It's like when you submit the YDS in Turkey or Yogdil, you just sit down for 3 hours, finish the exam, thank you, go home. But IELTS could be separated or divided into a couple of days, believe it or not. Not only, I mean, sometimes you have the speaking section. Usually it happens in an exam center, could be in a hotel lobby. There is the examiner sitting there waiting for you to come, and there is a
Sure.
meeting like face to face. So there is this table, it's like a desk. So the examiner is sitting and there are cards on the table. That's when you enter and they say, may I take a look at your passport? And so they look at your passport or ID. And then you pick up a card and start answering the questions. I don't think it's, unorthodox or highly unorthodox or unusual. I think it's enjoyable. But the bad news is, what if you need to go to another city to submit the IELTS test? That means you need to rent there. That means you need to make reservations in a hotel. This reminds me of SAT. Our topic is not SAT, but I have taught the SAT preparation, the English section, of course, not math. My mathematics
I
is,
see.
is less qualified than you imagine. I can't even teach ninth grade math. When people come to me and say, do you teach SAT? I say, yes, I teach the English part of SAT, not math, please. Okay, so the bad thing about IELTS is that you may take the speaking section on a different day. So you need to go to the exam center, familiarize yourself with it. You need to, hey, don't get lost. What if you use GPS and it doesn't take you there? So you need to make sure that you get a hotel or reservation, or if you're lucky enough, who knows, you might just have a friend who lives nearby.
I see.
Or you might even live near the exam center. Yes.
It's very
The
interesting.
TOEFL IBT, I mean, the good thing about it is it's like for 3 hours, you just go submit the entire exam. I would say almost nonstop, but there is a break for 10 minutes. It's a 10-minute break. So you take the reading section, and then you move on to the, basically the writing section. Then
Sure.
they ask you to put on the headset. So you get the listening section and the, speaking section. Before the listening section, that's when they give you a 10-minute break on the TOEFL test. It's a good idea to get a chocolate bar, energy bar, and just drink some water.
I see.
It's a good idea too. I mean, this is not irrelevant. It's funny, but I tell my students to put on a t-shirt and a sweater. Who knows? The exam hall might be hot for you, might be cold for you. You need to adapt.
I see.
The
Thank you.
IELTS test, on the other hand, lasts for 2 hours and 40 minutes. But the bad news is it's not taken in one shot. You take 2 sections or even 3 sections, and then there is a 4th section, which is a speaking, that could happen in a couple of hours. You may submit the exam in the morning, and they tell you, okay, come back this afternoon at 4 p.m., go to that exam center and submit the exam, submit the speaking section. Or they say, okay, tomorrow morning, they will let you know. They let you know beforehand that your speaking section is on a different day, on a separate day, or not. By the way, most of the time in the Middle East, for the availability of the examiners, they book a room in a hotel for themselves. And they, try to, by the way, the IELTS exam is provided or given 4 times a month. That's a lot, right? That's like 48 times in a year. Yes. The TOEFL IBT is available twice a month. That means 24 times a year. Apparently, I'm getting better at math now. Okay.
I see. It's great. Thank you very much, sir. By the way, you have already answered some of my questions.
Oh, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that.
No problem.
No,
I
but I
was
just
going to
want to
ask
be
you.
consistent. I want to be
Sure, it's
consistent.
great.
Consistency is really good.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's really great. So
Thanks a
let me
lot.
ask you to another question about it, and I'll move to
Sure.
the other questions. So,
Are we gonna get
how
questions
long,
from people, from viewers? Because
if
I mean, this is my
if they ask,
suggestion. They should ask.
let me tell you, if you have any questions to Mr. Halid Hicazi, you can write your questions into the question part, and I can divert your questions to him during our live session. And how long does it take to prepare for these tests?
Well, that depends. So let's just say that if you're at a proficiency level, which is level B2 plus, like C1, you can even prepare in a week. If your level is really efficient, you can prepare in a week. It's a quick crash course in a week, in a couple of weeks, if it's actual C1. But most people say that they're at level B1, and I usually tell them, okay, let's see about that. So I give them an actual test, a placement test to find out about their level, and it turns out to be less than B1. So this is why I tell them, okay, that means at least you need 4 months for background general English and 4 months again for exam tactics.
I see.
All in all, that would be 16 weeks for your general English to enable your English to reach the level to get to something called almost, proficiency level. If you're somewhere around early intermediate, or as they say in British English, intermediate, well, that means you can just prepare for like 16 weeks, let's say 4 months.
Wow. It's not a short period. It's
But
really long period of 4 months.
SAT requires 9 months.
Wow.
Yes, sir. SAT is like, we're talking about SAT. The passages are longer. There's something called ACT, which is also by College Board. By the way, SAT is for high school students who want to apply for university. SAT is like the Turkish, I don't know that exam. It's called YOS exam.
No.
YOS.
Yeah, I see.
That's for foreign students who want to study here. That's for foreign students who want to
see.
study in Turkey. Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for
The pleasure
this
is mine.
great information about these exams.
We hope that this will be useful and beneficial.
Of course.
Viewers.
And when they listen, when they watch it again and again, and they will get really useful information about the test. Let me ask you last question about the TOEFL and IELTS. How can people register these tests, and how much are these tests?
You may register online for sure. In most cases, you can register online so the TOEFL, you might have heard of TOEFL, ETS website. Okay, so this is the company that sponsors and is responsible. It's the owner of the TOEFL test. So if you just go to the ETS website, ETS, that's when you can have a profile, create a profile using your name, surname, using your last name, ID number, passport number, probably, address, mother tongue. They ask you all these kind of questions, date of birth and all, and then they ask you to add your credit card and pay. So you register, and they provide a guide, and they give you the exam dates, and they update you by email. So it's very simple. You don't even need you don't need to go to those, centers, local centers to provide some advice or exam dates, because they call themselves, they say danishmanlık, and I think this is not danishmanlık. I think it's just ripoff, because you can do it by yourself. Why should you just go to someone to register for you? Can't you register? If you can't register by yourself, are you sure you can take that exam? I don't think so.
I agree.
And so, for the IELTS, IELTS, there are kinds of IELTS. There is general IELTS. That's kind of institutional. That's kind of for getting a job or something. It's kind of local. The academic IELTS is what matters, and it's owned by the British Council itself or IDP. So you see, in some cities in this country, for example, they have IDP centers.
I see.
Or British Council itself. I'm talking about the original, authentic, real British center. So you may go in person if you live in Ankara or Istanbul or Izmir or Adana. You may go in person and register. If you live in Mersin, by the way, because I lived in Mersin before Konya, you may go to Tarsus, and this is interesting. Tarsus has an exam center for SAT. Tarsus has an exam center for TOEFL. Tarsus is great. There is an American college in Tarsus. People think Tarsus is just a small place for tourism, but hey, they really have some real American college. No kidding.
Wow. I didn't know that. It's really interesting.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you very much for this information. Let me ask you one more question about these exams. For you,
sure, go ahead.
When you think about all your experiences about these exams, which parts are the most difficult in these exams for you?
Well, that is the most important, crucial question ever, for this reason. It depends on the student and what they prefer. If you find yourself more comfortable talking face to face with someone, and by the way, IELTS, I mean, both exams, according to students, the speaking section is the challenge and the writing. But let me just, remind you that even the reading section cannot be taken for granted. Fun fact, the listening section on the IELTS includes questions of fill in the gaps. So you need to listen, and while you're listening, this is called wide listening skills, you need to fill in the gaps. So you have paper. I mean, by the way, there is IELTS computerized. It depends on if the institution you're applying for or the university you're applying for accepts or if you're lucky enough to have a center that has both options, paper test and computer test.
Sure.
Anyway, most of the time you're submitting the exam on paper. So during listening, while listening, you need to fill in the gaps. Hey, this is risky, people. What if you misspell a word? If you spell the word wrongly, even if you get it right, you lose the points. You lose it completely.
I see.
While on TOEFL IBT, there is no fill in the gaps questions for the listening section. It's not only mainly, it's all in all. It's entirely multiple choice questions, MCQ. Therefore, if you find that you're more into British English, if you prefer British English, then IELTS is always better. If you prefer American English, then TOEFL is what you have to choose, or you'd better consider TOEFL IBT. Which parts can be hard for me from my own experience? Honestly, when I teach my students, like I said, I try to see from their point of view what parts could be challenging for them. Most of the time, the speaking section, because there are, these are the stages of language acquisition, not only language learning. There is the receiving stage. That's what we call input in computer science and in language. This is the reading comprehension and the listening comprehension. But what about production stages?
I see.
I'm not talking about movie production or film production. I'm basically talking about producing, speaking, and producing writing. So production stages are always harder, that's for sure. It goes without saying.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. These are really important points that you mentioned.
Like I said, the pleasure is mine, and time is limited, so we can't actually cover the topic in short time.
Actually,
it requires
we could do the more as you mentioned. So let me move to another questions, like different questions, not about IELTS and TOEFL. Thank you very much. All the information that you've given for us here, sir.
Don't mention it. The pleasure is mine.
So can you tell us an interesting moment that you still remember in your teaching or learning career?
To be honest, there are interesting moments almost all the time, if not on a daily basis, at least every week we come across something interesting, like an interesting moment. It could be awkward, it could be funny, it could be hilarious, it could be, something to remember and unforgettable. But one of those interesting moments in my teaching career was in a classroom where a student fainted. Like I was literally teaching them and the student just fainted, passed out. And you know what happened? I had to call the ambulance by myself. I had to talk to the secretary. I had to talk to the people working there to get, the ambulance ASAP as soon as possible. And the student literally fainted on the floor. Well, that's because he was in love. He was in love with a girl who ignored him. She was sitting by his side, and she teased him by breaking his heart and talking to another person. There are many interesting moments in teaching. I mean, you just can basically find out that people are different types of people, and they have their own personal life and their own stories. So yeah, it's a very general question. I mean, interesting moments is when you, as a teacher, you need to be, you need to be level-headed. You need to be wise. You need to be rational, because some people can get sensitive about a joke, and it could get awkward. Yes, so there are a lot of interesting moments. There are so many interesting moments.
Thank you very much
my pleasure. There are moments when students can pick a fight with each other, and you have, like, now what to do. You're either you don't want to judge them. So you act like a parent. There is parenting, but not over parenting. You act as a doctor. You need to be, a life coach. You need to
Sure.
be fully prepared to, for crisis management, time management. I mean, being in a classroom is like, such,
A lot
but
of things.
I never look at that. I never viewed it as a responsibility or a burden above my shoulders. I've always viewed that as this is fun. This is what I want to do. This is where I find
Mm-hmm.
myself. I
I
belong in the
see.
classroom. It's my utopia.
I
This is why I
see. Thank you.
never accepted other careers or other jobs. I've always chosen to be a teacher.
Yeah.
That's what
Wonderful.
I've chosen.
Like me.
Thank you. Thank
That's
you,
what
sir.
I'm choosing. Yeah. It's a wonderful
Exactly.
job. It's a
Yeah.
really precious
That
job
makes two
that
of
we
us.
are
That
doing.
makes two of us.
Okay. Let me ask you, this next question is really interesting, and I'm really wondering what are you going to say about it. If you could have one superpower to use in the classroom, what would you do, and what would it be, and how would it help you?
You see, you're curious right now about my answer. You wonder what I would say. If I could have a superpower in the classroom, what would it be? It would be to make my students who are timid less timid and more talkative.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
makes me feel like a dentist because you know what a dentist does? A dentist tells you to open your mouth. And I sometimes feel like a dentist because I pull the words out of, I don't pull teeth, but I just pull words. So I just wish that I could make them more talkative because, most of the time when I ask students to be more
They're
talkative, they
shy.
say,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Then they give me, I ask such a question and they say, no, yes, well. So what did you eat yesterday? Food. Great, you ate food. Wow, that's amazing.
That's
People
amazing.
eat things. Some Turkish people tell me that they ate something. I don't know what that thing is, but they ate something. And I try to create a joke about it. I turn it into a joke. But when I ask them the next question to practice WH questions, who cooked that food for you? They say, my mom. So this person has a mom and he ate food yesterday. Think about it. So how about you ask me questions and they say, like what? And I know that this person is not interested in talking, so I wish I could have this superpower to make him more talkative.
Mm-hmm.
People
I see.
tell me that I'm super
Probably.
talkative. People tell me that I really talk a lot. And I get this accusation that, hey, you don't even let people talk. Wrong.
Uh-huh.
They should react faster. So I teach my students to react faster. Oh, there is,
I see.
superpower. Can we read the comment here?
If I could have
Oh,
superpower, I didn't allow earthquakes to happen in our classes. Exactly.
yeah.
I totally agree, Ezra. That's the situation that we are having right now. Probably we all want to have that superpower. Thank you, Ezra,
And if
for
we could
mentioning it.
have that superpower not to let children be afraid of earthquakes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Totally agree with you, sir. Thank you. Let's move to the next last question. Ready for
Sure.
it? Yeah.
Of course,
The
definitely.
last question is, here we go. What is your motto?
My motto in life? All right. There are several mottos that I'm really familiar with and I love them.
Mm-hmm.
But let me just say that my favorite motto is live and let live. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do not interfere in other people's business and do not let them interfere in yours.
I see.
And, there is another motto which is nothing succeeds like success. So if you feel fully motivated, you will be motivated forever.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. All right. So that's all my questions about Teacher Talk, sir. And before ending our live sessions, would you like to add anything else?
Sure. Phrasal verbs. Focus on phrasal verbs, people, because phrasal verbs will help you to understand the passage for using synonyms. And phrasal verbs will help you to understand native speakers in the listening comprehension section. And if you use phrasal verbs in your speaking the right way, do not overuse them. But if you use phrasal verbs correctly, this can definitely add more points to the score. And this will make the examiner who grades your paper or grades your answers realize that you have a good command of English and a good command of phrasal verbs.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, phrasal verbs could be 2 particles or 3 particle phrasal verbs, such as come up with, come up against, look forward to. We often hear them and we come across them. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, right now, we come across
Sure.
those phrasal verbs, but they're really significant for all types of tests.
I
Even for
see.
EA, they say you need
Mm-hmm.
phrasal verbs. That's for sure.
I
Can I
see.
can I
Thank
read
you.
this
Thank you.
comment? How
Sure,
can
sure.
students? Okay.
How can students with low self-esteem overcome this belief they are rubbish at language learning?
Oh my
You
God.
clearly have always had amazing natural ability as a learner and teacher combined with hard work.
Yeah. Well, this is a deep question. How to motivate students who underestimate their abilities? By asking them to be themselves if they really love English, not because they have to learn it, then they will be definitely intrinsically motivated. We can find the best in them. But if they're forced to improve their English, and if they have to improve their English, not because they want to, then I try to make them love English, and I try to show them that English is a language, not a subject, and it's fun to learn and it's enjoyable. So, yeah, I show my students that I can learn from them. And so I tell them, well, when I was your age, I was terrible at math. I was terrible at physics or chemistry. I'm still terrible at chemistry, actually. So I try to create some chemistry.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
The
Thank
pleasure
you.
is mine.
And that's all. And I just wanted to say, and actually, I would like to say
Is that
thank you.
all? I mean, time
To
flies. Time flies. I
Yeah,
didn't even
time. By
feel
the way,
it.
time flies. Yeah,
Yes,
Mr.
it
Sir,
does.
time flies. And
Well, I
we are
expected
we're
this meeting
coming.
to be more like I expected myself, like to be super boring for people, but thank
No,
God
no.
it worked.
It's not. It's not. It was really useful. It was fruitful, sir. And we have learned a lot about TOEFL and IELTS and other exams that you mentioned here. You give incredible, important, the important information about these exams. I'm sure that when they watch this session later, they will get lots of ideas about what is TOEFL, what is IELTS, and what are IBT and other exams.
Well, I am
And
ready for
we
any
talk.
other questions. I am
Sure.
ready for any other questions, not only now, even in the future. They may ask me whenever they want, and I hope I will be able to provide the answers, the
Sure.
adequate answers.
Of course. And if you have any questions to Mr. Halid about the TOEFL and IELTS, you are free to ask him whenever you want. You can just DM him, and then he will respond you back about your questions, I'm sure. And tonight, we had Halid Hicazi here with us, and we talk about TOEFL and IELTS, all about them. And we had a nice session with him. And we are going to be here next week at the same time on the same day with another educator with the different topics. And I would like to say one more time, we are really sorry about the things happen in our country. And I can easily say that pray for us, pray for Turkey, and pray for Syria, and pray for the people. And
Pray for
that's all.
humanity in general.
Yeah,
Yes,
pray
yes,
for
sir.
humanity. And that's all, people. Until the next time, take care of yourselves. And peace and bye-bye. And thank you very much, Mr. Halid,
Thanks for having me.
your
Thanks for having me.
for
Thanks for having
joining
me.
our live
Everybody may
sessions.
call me. Everybody may call me just Halid.
Okay,
You don't even have to
Halid.
call me Mister. Don't worry about
Okay,
it,
Halid.
please. I am totally okay with that.
Sure.
Our prayers are with you, and our prayers are with
Thank
the
you.
people of this country.
Yeah, we will together. We are strong. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a good
Bye-bye.
night, sir.
See you too.
Thanks for having me. Goodbye.
You're welcome.